Comment below describing your current financial situation to support prosperity and subscribe to my channel. I am counting on your help to spread this message of Jewish wealth. Hello, I am Rabbi Hugo Klein, and today I need to share with you a discovery that will completely transform the financial perspective of those who are over 45 years old and believed that their opportunities for prosperity had vanished forever. During my 40 years of studying and teaching the financial principles of Jewish wisdom, I discovered an ancient truth that modern financial institutions have preferred to keep hidden because it empowers people to build real wealth without depending on complex banking products or high-risk investments that only benefit the banks. I want you to understand something deeply liberating. There is a specific moment in life, usually between 45 and 65 years of age, when certain conditions align uniquely to create what the Jewish sages called the golden window of prosperity, a sacred period when accumulated experience, the network of relationships developed over decades, and crystalline clarity about priorities combine to generate opportunities for enrichment that simply do not exist at younger ages. Modern society has created a cruel and destructive narrative that after 45 people should just resign themselves to their financial situation, passively accept that they missed their moment to get rich, and focus only on surviving until retirement with the minimum possible. When in fact, Jewish tradition has always taught that true financial wisdom only fully blossoms in maturity. For that is exactly when one deeply understands the real value of time, authentic relationships, and concrete opportunities, versus the shiny illusions that seduce the young. This cultural lie was deliberately planted to keep experienced people in the position of dependent consumers rather than prosperous producers who could use their accumulated wisdom to create sustainable wealth. Let me tell you about Helen, 52 years old, a nurse who dedicated 30 years of her life caring for people in hospitals until she was forced to retire due to severe spinal health problems that prevented her from continuing intense physical work. Helen spent the first 2 years after retirement living in deep depression, believing that her only source of income would be the small Social Security pension that barely covered her basic expenses, feeling useless and discarded by the world until the day I discovered how she could transform 3 decades of care experience into a thriving specialized consulting business for families with elderly members. Helen applied the Jewish concept of chochmah, practical wisdom that only comes with lived experience, and in just 2 years she managed to multiply her income 5 times over. Not by selling products she didn't master or services she didn't understand, but by monetizing decades of specialized knowledge that she didn't even know had immense commercial value in the current market. Today, Helen guides families on how to care for the elderly at home, teaches fall prevention techniques, develops personalized care plans, offers training for private caregivers, and has even created an online course on geriatric first aid that sells automatically while she sleeps. Her expertise in identifying early signs of dementia, her ability to communicate with the elderly at different stages of lucidity, her knowledge of medications and their interactions, all of this turned into multiple sources of income that generate much more than her previous hospital salary. Helen told me with tears in her eyes, "Rabbi, I thought I was finished at 50, but I discovered that I was actually just beginning to reap the fruits of a lifetime of learning." I also want to share the transformative case of Robert, 48 years old, a carpenter who had always worked for others for 25 years and felt too old to start a business, until he deeply understood the Jewish principle of zekut avot, the merit of the ancestors, which in the financial context means that every skill developed and refined over the years becomes a valuable inheritance that can be transformed into an independent and lasting source of income. Robert started teaching basic carpentry to young people through in-person weekend courses, then created a virtual online school that today has over 3,000 monthly paying students, generating an income that far exceeds what he earned in decades of heavy manual labor, because he discovered that his true wealth was not just in his calloused and skilled hands, but mainly in his knowledge refined by time and conscious repetition. Robert developed his own teaching method that combines traditional carpentry techniques with modern tools, created exclusive projects that his students can do at home even with little space, established partnerships with hardware stores that offer discounts to his students, and still earns commissions from these sales. He told me, "Rabbi, I thought that after 40 I was only good for breaking my back working for a boss. But I discovered that I can teach a lifetime of knowledge to people who want to learn, and that is worth much more than any manual labor. The spiritual truth I need to reveal is that there is a hidden law of prosperous maturity based on the Talmudic concept of sekel, combined emotional and practical intelligence, which establishes that people over 45 possess three invisible but powerful competitive advantages that younger people simply do not have and cannot acquire artificially. First advantage, the refined ability to identify real opportunities versus passing fads and empty promises, developed through decades of observing economic cycles, seeing companies rise and fall, witnessing technological changes that seemed revolutionary but disappeared quickly. Second advantage, a solid network of relationships built over decades that can be activated in ways that generate genuine mutual value, not superficial networking, but deep human connections based on trust and shared history. Third advantage, a healthy urgency that eliminates juvenile procrastination and creates laser focus on what actually works and produces concrete results, with no time to waste on unnecessary experiments. This law has remained hidden for generations because the modern economy was deliberately structured to favor the impulsive consumption of the young and the institutional dependence of the mature, creating a system that turns experienced people into passive consumers instead of utilizing them as active producers of value. Jewish principles have always recognized that the true ability to build sustainable and meaningful wealth arises precisely when time-tested experience, a consolidated network of relationships, and absolute clarity of purpose are combined, elements that only fully consolidate after 45 years of lived life consciously. My cup must be full first, so that the overflow can nourish other plants. You are not too old to prosper. You are finally mature enough to prosper for real. The first practical step to activate this golden window of prosperity is to perform what I call the inventory of accumulated wisdom, a deep spiritual and financial exercise where you will methodically list all the skills, knowledge, and experiences you have developed over the last 20 years, no matter how simple or obvious they may seem to you, because every experience consciously repeated 1,000 times becomes valuable expertise that can be transformed into a sustainable source of income. I want you to understand something fundamental, from specific technical knowledge to subtle relationship skills, from the ability to solve particular problems to a deep understanding of specific niche needs. All of this represents intellectual capital that was invested over decades and is now ripe to generate dividends. When I taught this principle to Martha, 51 years old, an executive assistant who worked for 28 years at the same construction company before being laid off in a cost-cutting measure, she initially resisted, saying she didn't know how to do anything special, that she was just an ordinary secretary. But when we started the detailed inventory, we discovered that Martha deeply knew all the local suppliers, perfectly understood the real timelines of each type of construction project, knew how to negotiate with public agencies for permit releases, completely mastered the documentation required for construction financing, and had a network of relationships with engineers, architects, and contractors built over almost 3 decades. In 6 months, Martha opened a specialized consultancy in documentation management for small construction companies, offering exactly the services she did naturally every day, but now as an independent businesswoman, charging fair rates for her expertise. Today, she earns 3 times more than she earned as an employee, works fewer hours, has total freedom of schedule, and most importantly, feels valued and respected for the knowledge she possesses. The second step is to create what I call the strategic relationship map, where you will systematically identify all the people you know in different areas of your life, former co-workers, neighbors of many years, family members, longtime friends, acquaintances from social groups, people who frequent the same places as you, and you will carefully analyze what real problems these people face that could be solved with the skills you identified in the previous inventory. Wealth after 45 does not come from conquering new, unknown markets or competing with young people in areas we do not master, but from serving better, and in a more specialized way, people who already trust you and know your credibility built over the years. Let me tell you about Charles, 54 years old, a retired accountant who thought his career was over when the company where he worked for 30 years closed its doors. Charles spent months looking for a job in accounting firms, but always heard that he was too old or didn't know the most modern software. When we applied the strategic relationship map, we discovered that Charles personally knew dozens of small business owners in the area where he lived, people who had seen him at the bakery, at the supermarket, at the pharmacy for over 20 years. These merchants trusted him, knew he was honest and competent, but had never thought of him as a possible accountant because they only saw him as a neighbor. Charles started offering simple financial organization services to these small businesses, explaining taxes clearly, helping to control cash flow, guiding on labor obligations. Within a year, Charles had 15 regular clients, paying monthly retainers, earned more than when he was an employee, and most importantly, worked exclusively with people who already respected and trusted him even before he offered the services. The third step is to implement the strategy of the prosperous Sabbath, consciously dedicating one full day a week exclusively to plan, study, and execute actions related to building your new source of wealth, without pressure for immediate results, but with absolute consistency and spiritual discipline. Unlike young people who need to run desperately against time because they have bills to pay and constant social pressures, mature people have the strategic advantage of being able to invest steadily and disciplinedly in projects that grow organically, without the destructive anxiety that leads to hasty decisions. During these days of prosperous Sabbath, you will dedicate time to study your potential market, research how other people are monetizing knowledge similar to yours, develop clear value propositions, create simple materials that demonstrate your expertise, establish prices based on the value you deliver, and mainly, systematically contact people from your relationship map to offer your solutions in a natural and non-invasive way. This sacred day of construction must be treated with the same reverence that the ancient Jews treated the traditional Sabbath, a moment separated from ordinary time, dedicated entirely to sustainable spiritual and material growth. Here I introduce a revolutionary concept I call reverse tzedakah, where instead of donating money you don't have, or sacrificing your financial security to help others, you focus primarily on developing your capacity to generate abundant value so that you can later give with genuine prosperity, strictly applying the spiritual principle that one cannot give what one does not possess, and that true generosity is born of conscious prosperity, never from sacrifice that inevitably generates resentment and bitterness. The Eternal does not want your self-destructive sacrifice. He wants your order, your wisdom, your ability to prosper sustainably so that you can be a lasting blessing to others. I will now teach the 20% experience rule, a practical principle that establishes dedicating exactly 20% of your available time to transforming past experiences into active sources of income, whether through specialized consulting, structured teaching, personalized mentoring, or creating products based on the refined knowledge you have accumulated. At 45 or older, your time is worth infinitely more than at 25, so every hour invested consciously must generate a return multiplied by the wisdom and experience that only you possess in that specific area. To validate your ideas without wasting precious resources, implement the 30-day test technique, where you choose a specific skill or knowledge you identified in your inventory, and for exactly 30 days, dedicate yourself intensively to finding 3 different ways to monetize it. Always starting with simple services for known people who already trust you, then gradually expanding to larger niches, always validating real demand before investing significant time or money in complex structures. Remember, generosity without limits is not a virtue, it is self-abandonment. Your prosperity after 45 is not selfishness, it is spiritual responsibility, with the talent received and refined through decades of conscious experience. Now I need to teach you how to establish prices based on the true value of your experience, not the time spent, because this is one of the most devastating mistakes mature people make when they begin to monetize their knowledge. You must charge for the wisdom and the results you can deliver, not for the hours worked, because your fundamental competitive advantage lies in solving problems faster and more effectively due to experience accumulated over decades. When a recent college graduate needs 8 hours to solve a problem that you solve in 2 hours because you have faced similar situations hundreds of times, you shouldn't charge less, you should charge more, because you are delivering the most valuable solution: speed, precision, and reliability based on time-tested experience. Let me share the transformation of Sarah, 49 years old, a dietitian who worked 15 years in hospitals before opening a small private practice that barely paid her bills. Sarah made the classic mistake of charging per consultation based only on appointment time, competing with younger nutritionists on price, until I taught her the principle of pricing by expertise. Sarah realized that her hospital experience gave her specialized knowledge about nutrition for patients with complex medical conditions, something that newly graduated nutritionists simply did not possess. She completely reformulated her positioning, began offering complete dietary re-education programs for people with diabetes, hypertension, and heart problems, charging fees that reflected not the consultation time, but the value of avoiding serious medical complications. Sarah multiplied her fees by 4 times, reduced her number of appointments by half, but drastically increased the satisfaction of patients who obtained results that no other professional could deliver. She told me, "Rabbi, I finally understood that my age and experience are not disadvantages. They are my greatest qualifications. It is fundamental to understand and apply the principle of strategic patience, a virtue proper to maturity that allows building sustainable businesses that grow slowly but solidly and permanently, without the destructive anxiety that leads inexperienced young people to burn precious opportunities by wanting spectacular immediate results. After 45, the social pressure for instant and ostentatious success naturally decreases, allowing total focus on the consistent and intelligent construction of lasting wealth. You have the freedom to plant seeds that will germinate slowly, to cultivate relationships that will bear fruit over the years, to develop a solid reputation based on consistent results rather than grandiose promises. I know the inspiring case of Michael, 56 years old, an engineer who lost his job at 53 and decided to apply this principle to create an energy efficiency consultancy for small industries. Michael was in no rush to get rich quickly, so he spent 3 years deeply studying the market, personally getting to know dozens of industrial business owners in the region, developing his own methodologies based on his 3 decades of experience in industrial plants, creating detailed case studies that proved his capabilities. When he finally started offering his services, Michael already had an established reputation, solid references, proven methodology, and managed to close long-term contracts with excellent profit margins. Today, at 59, Michael works 4 days a week, earns 3 times more than he earned as an employee, and has a waiting list of clients who want his services. He built this without rushing, without desperation, only with strategic patience and accumulated competence. I need to reveal now the hidden law of deep relationships, a principle that explains why people over 45 have access to a special type of trust that simply cannot be bought or accelerated. Over 2 or 3 decades of adult life, you have naturally developed relationships based on shared history, moments of difficulty overcome together, mutual favors over the years, trust tested in real situations. These deep relationships are an invisible but extremely powerful financial asset, because people prefer to do business with those they have known and trusted for years than with competent strangers with no history. Young entrepreneurs need to invest years building credibility that you already naturally possess. The strategy is to consciously activate these relationships through what I call the approach of gradual revelation, where you do not come offering services directly, but naturally share your new activities during casual conversations with people who are already part of your life. When you meet an acquaintance at the supermarket and they ask how you are, instead of complaining about the situation, you naturally mention that you are developing an interesting project in the area you have always mastered. This approach is infinitely more effective than aggressive sales techniques because it leverages existing relationships instead of trying to create new ones from scratch. I will teach the transformative concept of monetization of patience, which recognizes that your ability to wait for the right moment, not to accept any opportunity out of desperation, to choose clients and projects based on mature criteria rather than immediate need, is an extraordinary competitive advantage. Young entrepreneurs often accept problematic clients, poorly paid projects, dangerous partnerships because they need money urgently. You have the wisdom to recognize that a no at the right time is worth more than 10 hasty yeses. I implemented this concept with Beatrice, 52 years old, a lawyer specializing in employment law who decided to open her own firm after being let go. Beatrice had savings for 6 months without working, so she could carefully choose her first clients instead of accepting just any case. She turned down several clients who wanted to pay little or had unrealistic expectations, focusing only on cases where she could deliver exceptional results, charging fair rates. In 2 years, Beatrice built a select portfolio of business clients who respect her, pay on time, and recommend her to other business owners of the same level. She works less and earns more than when she was an employee, simply because she had the patience to build it right from the start. The next step is to develop what I call compound expertise, combining 2 or more areas of knowledge that you master to create unique solutions that no young specialist can easily replicate. Your multidisciplinary experience, acquired over decades working in different contexts, allows you to build bridges between areas that focused specialists cannot see. This combination of seemingly unrelated knowledge often generates the most valuable and differentiated solutions in the market. Remember this fundamental truth: my cup must be full first, so that the overflow can nourish other plants. Your prosperity does not compete with the prosperity of others. It feeds it. When you prosper using your experience consciously and ethically, you create opportunities for others, generate jobs, pay taxes that fund public services, move the local economy, and primarily demonstrate that mature people have immense value in a society that insists on discarding accumulated wisdom. We now arrive at the deepest moment of this journey, where I need to reveal the spiritual truth that transforms not only your financial situation, but your entire understanding of the purpose of maturity in divine creation. During all these years teaching these principles, I realized that the greatest transformation does not happen when my students start earning more money, but when they finally understand that their age is not a limitation to be overcome, but a qualification to be celebrated and consciously monetized. The Eternal did not create the seasons of life by chance. Each phase has its unique gifts, and maturity carries the most precious gift of all, wisdom distilled by consciously lived experience. I want to share with you the story that moved me the most in recent years, the transformation of Anthony, 61 years old, a retired industrial mechanic who came to me completely desperate because his pension barely covered the medications for his diabetic wife. Anthony had worked 40 years keeping industrial machines running, knew every sound, every vibration, every signal a machine emits before braking, but thought this knowledge had no value because factories preferred to hire young engineers with degrees instead of experienced mechanics. When I applied the inventory of accumulated wisdom with him, we discovered that Anthony possessed knowledge that no university teaches: the ability to diagnose complex problems in industrial machines just by listening to the noises, something that saves thousands of dollars in unnecessary production halts. Anthony began offering preventive diagnostic services to small factories in the region, charging a fixed monthly fee for bi-weekly visits, where he simply walked the factory floor, listening to the machines, and indicating which ones needed attention before braking. In 6 months, Anthony had 8 regular clients who paid religiously because they knew he avoided huge losses with his decades of experience. But the moment that deeply moved me was when Anthony came to me crying, not from sadness, but from gratitude, saying, "Rabbi, for the first time in my life I feel respected for what I know, not discarded for what I don't have. People call me an expert now. They want my opinion. They value my experience. I discovered that I am not too old to work. I am too experienced to work cheap." This is the deepest transformation that happens when you apply these principles correctly. You not only improve your financial situation, you recover your dignity, your self-esteem, your sense of purpose and usefulness in the world. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is exiting the stage and start recognizing yourself as someone who has finally reached the peak of their capabilities. The next 20 years will not be of decline, but of harvesting the plantation you cultivated for decades without realizing you were creating a treasure. Now I need to teach you the ritual of the weekly financial blessing, a spiritual practice that will consolidate all this transformation. Every Friday at the moment the sun sets, you will dedicate 30 minutes to consciously and gratefully review everything you built during the week toward your prosperity. Contacts made, services offered, knowledge shared, relationships strengthened, projects advanced. You will bless every small step, acknowledge every progress, however small it may seem, and primarily, You will thank the Eternal for allowing you to reach the age of wisdom with health and the capacity to apply decades of learning for your own benefit and that of others. During this ritual, you will also practice the exercise of prosperous vision, clearly visualizing yourself 2 years from now living from the conscious monetization of your experience, serving clients who respect and value your knowledge, charging fair rates for solutions that only you can deliver with the depth your experience allows, working fewer hours, but with much more satisfaction and recognition. This is not fantasy. It is spiritual planning based on real capabilities you already possess and only need to organize and offer consciously. I want you to deeply understand that implementing these principles is not just a financial strategy. It is an act of spiritual obedience to the divine purpose for your life. The Eternal did not allow you to accumulate decades of experience for that wisdom to die with you, but for it to become a blessing for others and prosperity for you. When you consciously monetize your experience, you are not being greedy or materialistic. You are being faithful to the talent you received and responsible for the administration of the gifts that were entrusted to you. I will leave you with a practical challenge that I call the commitment of the 40 days of mature prosperity. During the next 40 days, you will dedicate 1 hour daily, every single day, without exception, to systematically implement the principles I taught. Complete your inventory of accumulated wisdom. Develop your strategic relationship map. Practice the approach of gradual revelation with at least 3 people per week. Define your prices based on the value of experience and mainly, offer your knowledge to at least 1 new person each week. 40 days is the biblical time of complete transformation, the period it takes for new habits to permanently consolidate in your life. I want you to write right now, at this moment, on a sheet of paper, the following declaration of mature prosperity. I acknowledge that my experience has immense value, that my age is a qualification and not a limitation, that the next years will be the most prosperous of my life because I finally understood how to transform decades of wisdom into an abundant source of income and dignity. I commit to honoring my knowledge, valuing my experience, charging fair prices for the results I can deliver, and mainly, seeing my maturity as the golden phase of true prosperity. Repeat with me this final blessing that closes our journey. May the Eternal abundantly bless the next years of your life with prosperity based on wisdom, with clients who recognize and value your experience, with projects that honor your knowledge, and mainly, with the inner peace of knowing that you finally understood that it is not too late to prosper, but that exactly the right moment has arrived to reap the fruits of a life lived consciously. May your cup overflow with financial and spiritual blessings, and may your experience become a bridge of prosperity for many others who need to learn what you already know. Amen. So be it, and may it remain so forever.